Well, thousands of people wearing symbolic anonymous masks take to the streets in different European and American cities to protest against capitalism and government corruption. The movement is organised by Million Masks March Group that asked its supporters to gather at state capitals and city halls. The marchers say they are against inequality, government spying on people, police brutality and lies by officials. In many locations, protests have turned violent. In Washington, people blocked traffic along the Constitution Avenue, marching towards the White House and to the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah, my name is Ray Lewis. I'm a retired Philadelphia police captain, and I'm here today to support Anonymous because they are uncovering the lies and the falsehood of this government.
In Britain, protesters gathered in London's Westminster and clashed with police there. The protesters chanted anti-government slogans and threw objects at the police. At least 3 people were arrested and a police car was set on fire. The anonymous movement has held protests since 2012. However, it gathered steam after leaked information revealed that the US government had been systematically spying on people on a massive scale and was forcing popular websites to provide the administration with people's personal information.
In 1605, Guy Fawkes was foiled in his plot to blow up the British Parliament. Flash forward several hundred years later, thousands of protesters descended on Westminster to show their discontent, 2015 style.
We're not here to cause any problems. We're not here for violence like the news is saying. We're not here to cause trouble. We're here to put our point across and make it known to the world that, you know, we deserve better than the way our country is being treated.
To be fair, the list is so endless. You know, the cuts, austerity, pensions, war. There's so many things that we're all marching for. You know, there's not any one specific thing. And it's so important that we all come out and we all show solidarity against this.
Some people are here because they're anti-austerity. Some people are anti-surveillance. But whatever the reason is, we're not divided by race, religion, sexual orientation. We're all united. We are the 99%.
The police failed to stop the crowds from marching to key points in the heart of Westminster.
The heavy police presence in central London is somehow attempting to keep the demonstrators in a specified area, as outlined in some of the police literature that's been distributed to the demonstrators earlier. But if the crowd's movement is anything to go by, that advice is falling on deaf ears.
The police had promised a show of strength. Many protesters felt it was provocative and unnecessary.
It is very overdone, and I mean, I've seen rows of police vans coming down the roads and stuff as I've travelled. It really is just way too much, and a lot of people who are angry and kind of feeling hard done to, they're more likely to turn to violence the more police there are.
As I came out the station, I could see all their riot vans all sitting in their riot gear, ready for them to instigate something against us.
There were several public order arrests with some damage to property. London was one of over 600 locations holding anonymous-inspired demonstrations. Amina Taylor, Press TV, London.
And to put this story into further context, we're joined from New York by Joe Lombardo. He is with the United National Anti-War Coalition. Thank you very much, Joe, for joining us here on Press TV. For the 4th year in a row, the Anonymous Army is taken to the streets all across the world in massive numbers. What did you think about the turnout? Were you surprised?
Yeah, I don't know what numbers there were in Europe. I know there were demonstrations in many cities in the United States. The Anonymous movement was one of the movements that initiated the protests in 1912, the Occupy protest that took place in hundreds of cities all across the United States.
Well, Joe, do you think that taking to the streets a few times a year can actually change the world?
Well, no. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing is instead of having a demonstration where people demonstrate and come home, what we've learned from the Occupy movement and what we've learned from the Black Lives Matter movement is people need to stay in the streets. And with Occupy, they did for quite a long time. And the same thing with the Black Lives Matter movement. They just came out day after day after day. This in itself is not going to change anything, but it has influenced the thinking of many, many Americans. And right now you see these demonstrations that we've seen that Anonymous has initiated, the Million Mask March, that it's focusing on capitalism. And I think that's very important. Rather than having a single issue around war or around austerity or around spying, they are tying all these together and saying it's systemic. And I think that's the real situation.
And very briefly, if you may, what did you think about the mainstream media's coverage of these marches?
Frankly, I haven't seen too much mainstream media coverage, and in the United States anyway. And that is a general situation in this country. When something is anti-government, you don't see it very much. It's a new kind of censorship that is happening in this country.
Thank you very much. Joe Lombardo with the United National Anti-War Coalition joining us from New York.